Welcome back to the GambleSmart channel. Hope you guys are doing well out there. So today we're going to be talking about all the methods that you see out there concerning certain number of spins and testing machines. Are you able to do 5 spins, 10 spins, 20, 60, 100, 1,000? Can you do these to be able to learn what the potential return is on a machine and if you're playing the right denomination? Is that even possible? So today I'm going to prove to you guys that the science and the math says, no, that's not possible. Let's get into it. All right, if you are new here, we want to welcome you to the GambleSmart channel. We are here to better educate you to become better, smarter, and more responsible gamers, but it's up to you to decide whether you're a gambler or not. If you're not a gambler, this isn't the video for you. We don't want to entice you to get back in there. Go click on something else. There's a lot of like roller coaster rides and stuff you can watch on YouTube. Anyways, but if you are a gambler or if you're just curious and you want to know a little bit more about the behind-the-scenes math and probabilities of a slot machine, this is going to be the video for you. And we've done something really cool that I don't think has been done before, and it's something that you're going to get to play with that'll really nail this home for you. So I think if you've ever been on the edge of trying to understand the math and probabilities behind a slot machine, this little tool that we built is probably going to make that connection for you. So stay tuned for that. But first, I want to talk about the methods that have to do with doing a certain number of spins and filling out a machine. So these are fairly common, and you've seen them around YouTube, no doubt. We are not knocking any creator at all. That's not what this video is about. It's all about the actual the science behind it, right? That's what we're here for. We're here to break through the things that you might have heard and explain what is truly going on. There are actually some really good methods out there that have to do with a certain number of spins, but they're focused mostly on bankroll management and learning when to get up and walk away so you don't become, tunnel vision with the slot machines. Those are really good methods. But the methods that say, well, if you do a certain number of spins, you can actually feel out the RTP and determine if the machine is a winner or not, to decide ultimately to keep playing it or to leave it, right? And so you see these a lot, but is there any science behind it? Can you actually do that? So the tool that we built today is basically taking the par sheet, and the par sheet is basically think of it as the documentation of the math behind every single slot machine. Every single slot machine that is on the casino floor has a par sheet associated with it, so that the casino operators and the test labs, like GLI test labs, can know exactly what the probabilities are for each outcome on that machine, right? It's a document. Unfortunately, it's not available to the public, but fortunately, we did find one that was publicized to the public in a paper from, I think, 2004, and that's for the double diamond machine, okay? So what we ended up doing is we built a simulation of using the par sheet from a double diamond slot machine so that we can replicate playing it as many spins as we want to, so we can see what the actual return values are over time as we do a certain set of spins, right? And the thing that makes it difficult to prove, somebody actually reached out to me and said, you know what, you should just start proving all these methods incorrect. And I said, well, the only way I could legitimately do that scientifically is to do over a very long period of time, because that's how slot machine math is programmed to work. And so I was like, I can't just sit and play one of these machines behind me for millions of spins on camera. That's just not feasible, right? But what we can do is simulate the math behind it and simulate a certain number of spins and have it run the program, right? Which is essentially what the test labs do, as well as manufacturers, before they even deploy a slot machine to the casino floor, to make sure that the math and the probabilities that they've programmed into that machine actually come to fruition over time, right? It's regulated to be so. The test labs test it to be so, and the casinos would never put something on the floor that's unpredictable for them. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later, so stay tuned for that. All right, so let's take a look at this, and I'm going to give you guys a link in the description below. If you want to play with it yourself, go for it. I think it's going to open a lot of eyeballs out there. I think you guys are going to learn exactly what is going on behind the scenes. And I know a lot of you might say, well, yeah, this is double diamond. It's like an old-ass machine from 2004. Actually, it's even earlier than that. Why? It's got to be different now, and it actually isn't. Every single slot machine has a par sheet. It has a probability document. It doesn't matter where it's virtual, like the multi-win Ainsworth behind me, or physical with the actual double diamond reels and stuff. It doesn't make any difference. They're both run off of a par sheet, okay? That is how the probabilities are laid out. All right, so let's look at this together and see what's going on. So the double diamond machine, you can see the pay table up here at the top. Should be familiar if you've ever played double diamond. We're just doing single credit bets here because all the multiple credits is just a multiplier of your bet. So double diamond, 3 red sevens, or 3 sevens in this case, because we don't have red sevens in emojis. And then you can see the rest of them there. So here's what you're trying to do, right? You want to do 5 spins. So let's switch to 5 spins. And what you're trying to do is find the machine that is set to 97%, right? So we have 4 double diamond machines right here. one set at 87, one set at 90, one at 93, and one at 97. Okay, so let's go ahead and run it 5 spins. Let's say you sit down at each of these, and you think that you're going to determine which is set to be the winner, right? So what we see here is the 87% actually paid back 80%. The 90% paid back 0, so there were no hits whatsoever in the 5 spins. 93%, we got a 200% return, so we doubled our money, which is pretty cool. But the 97%, which was the highest, was 100%, okay? So what would have happened if you would have played the 5 spin of the 90%? You probably would have thought, wow, this machine's set to lose, but it actually wasn't the worst. The 87% was the worst setting, but actually outperformed the 90%, okay? But let's just say you set at the 93%, you got 200%, right? I doubled my money in 5 spins. This one is clearly set to win. This machine is hot, right? So let's run the simulation again. And I want you to note something here. I did not change anything. I didn't change the payback percentage. I didn't change the math. There's no algorithm change. Nothing changed, right? I just had it run an additional 5 RNG pools for each of the different machines. Now look at the results. So now we have 80% on the 87%, and so we do on the 97% as well. So they both tied, even though they're 10% difference in RTP. And this time, if you would have stuck on the 93%, now it only paid back 40%. We'll do it one more time, and then we're going to move up the ladder here. Okay, so now look at this. The 97%, no hits whatsoever. So are you kind of seeing like 5 spins just isn't enough data, right? It's too short of a sample size, because the way math works inside of a slot machine, probability-wise, is over a long period of time. And we're going to show a graph at the bottom that's going to make a lot of sense, but we need to do more spins before we can do that. Okay, so let's go up here, and let's say we'll do 100 spins. Okay, maybe 5 spins you agree, not enough. So let's bump it up to 100 spins. Surely that's enough to give us more indication of what the RTP is on each of these machines. Okay, so let's take a look here. So this time, what do you see? Kind of interesting, right? So the 87% over here paid back 106%, where the 97% paid back 67%. And the worst was 93%. So even after 100 spins, the worst setting machine, the 87%, outperformed all the others. How could this possibly be? The reason is because it's still not enough spins, okay? I want you to scroll down and look at this chart here. You see how it's all over the place? How these lines are just like, wow, like this? This is short-term variance. That's what it's called. And the idea is that the further away it is from the average, which the average is the RTP setting, so 97% is the average, the further away it gets from that 97% whenever you're playing is the variance that's rearing its ugly head here. And that's why it can be all over. It can be a roller coaster. And the more volatility built into the game, the higher the variance could be. And what that essentially means is that even though the 97% is at a 67% return here, if it was a high volatility game, this could be all the way down into 0 to 200%. It could be just a bigger range away from the average. Okay, I'm trying to break this down because math is not. We hate math, right? I get it. But this stuff is important because you're going to learn that hot and cold just don't exist, at least not in a way that you can predictably determine that it's hot or cold to continue making bets, okay? Now let's bump up to 1,000. Maybe at this point you agree 100's still not enough, but 1,000 surely is going to be enough. Do you think when I hit run simulation that they're all going to be pretty close to the payback percentage numbers this time? Well, let's see. Okay, so what do we have here? We have, let's see, 87.60. So the 90% and the 97 were actually pretty close this time. 90% inching ahead. 75% for the 93, the 87% for the 81. So what have you noticed here? So they're still kind of all over the place, right? They're still not close to the percentage setting on the machine, but they're closer. And that's because over 1,000 spins, you start to see the averages. But it's still not enough to be able to detect which of these is the highest paying machine, okay, after 1,000 spins. Okay, let's go up to 10,000. Let's run through that. Okay, now you see things getting a little bit tighter, right? So the 97 was at 92, the 93 was at 89, the 90% was at 82, so a little low, and the 87 was actually paying more at 92. So that's after, what did we do, 100,000 or 10,000 spins, right? Let's do another 10,000 real quick. Okay, look at these numbers. So 83, 86, 82, 82. So still, they're getting close. Like they're within about 10% either side of, maybe a little bit more like 15% of either side. Certainly not as bad as it was when we did 5 and 100, right? Because they were all over the place. We had 40s, we had 20s in there. Now they're a little bit closer, okay? Now let's look at 100,000 spins. Maybe now you really agree that if you could do 100,000 spins, maybe you set a camera on a slot machine and you bet it, do 100,000 spins on it, and now it's going to tell you an indication of exactly which is the highest paying machine by doing that. Okay, so what do we have here? So 89% on the 97, 90% on the 93, 85% on the 90, and 87% on the 85. So they're getting closer, but it's still too difficult to tell because of how far difference they are between the 93 and the 97, for example, right? Or the 90% and the 93. So let's look at the graph now. Now, you see what's going on? This is the long-term expected. This is the long-term here. See this? All the way down here? This is what casinos are looking at and expecting, right? They know that over time, that machine will give it exactly or very close to what the payback percentage is. It will just happen naturally because of everything that plays out. Slot machine players are not in it for the long game. We're not looking at this right side. What we are experiencing is what is over here on the left side where it's all crazy. It's because we're not doing enough spins to let the averages play out. Okay? Now let's go for the gusto here. Let's do 1,000,000 spins, which is getting closer to what that test labs actually do. They end up doing about 10 million spins. So let's run the simulation for 1,000,000 spins, and you can see that it's still off, but it's still relatively close. Okay, so let me run it again. Okay, so now it's starting to kind of get closer and closer here. 92 for the 93%, 93 for the 97, 85 for the 90, and 85 for the 87. Okay, we'll do it one more time. Okay, but you can see everything is shrinking and getting a little bit tighter. If we were to do the 10 million pulls on this, it'd probably break the computer. But if we did 10 million pulls on each of these, you would see that it's getting very, very close to that payback percentage. And if we look at the graph again, you can see it's really flattening out now because it's reaching those averages. So I wanted to put this chart up here too. Let me kind of zoom in a little bit so you can see it. So this is basically how long you would have to play before you could tell. And what you're looking at is the margin of error. So when you get up into the million and 10 million, you can see the margin of error is shrinking pretty rapidly. So plus 1% and plus 0.3%. So if you were to do 1,000,000 or 10 million pulls, then you're probably more likely to be able to notice which machine is set the highest. But we don't know that, right? And there's no way to test. And guys, this is pure math, right? Math doesn't lie. And it's important to understand that this is exactly how probabilities work in a slot machine. It doesn't matter how old it is or how new it is. This is exactly the process that is put out on the par sheet. This is exactly the process that the test labs like GLI test for whenever a manufacturer produces a game before it ends up on the casino floor. So this actually busts a lot of myths. One is the hot and cold. Will it be hot and cold? Yes, you saw it right here. Like you saw the hot and cold working, where sometimes the machine that was set the worst was actually doing better. It was on a hot streak, okay? And I'm using those in quotes. But it doesn't last forever, and it's not predictable, right? Sometimes it did it, sometimes it didn't. The other myth is the number of spins. You can test machines out to see which is set the highest by bouncing around with the different denominations or whatever. That is also false. Another thing that is also false is being able to watch somebody play for, say, 100 spins or 1,000 spins and saying, wow, that machine must be really tight. That's not what you may be experiencing. There is the variance or the volatility, but not the RTP. Okay, let's wrap this all up. All right, so let's wrap all this up. You guys are probably like sick of looking at this math, and I hope at least some of you nerded out a little bit. But this is important stuff, right? You hear a lot of things on the internet. You hear a lot of things on YouTube. And we're all looking for that edge, like I said earlier. We're all looking for a way to beat the casino and figure out these slot machines, because if we can, maybe we can bump up our edge. And the only way to really do that is to play a game that has a plus EV expected value at some point, okay, in its persistent state. And there's not a lot of machines that do that. Normal slot machines do not operate in that way. They are a negative expectation game. And so anything that you're trying to do in the short term to try to figure it out or to find out what the return is on that machine is just a lost effort. You're not going to be able to do it in such a small sample size. And some of you may say, yeah, but this was an old-ass machine. It was double diamond. You know, things have changed. The thing is it's actually gotten even harder to to determine what the payback percentage is, because back then, if you sat there and watched the symbols for long enough, you could probably start to figure something out, right? But nowadays, man, with the visual slots, it's even more incredibly difficult to try to determine anything. Guys, this is pure math. It is pure probabilities. The stuff is not made up. If you want to look into it, I will also put another link to a well-documented and published document that came out. I'll put a link in the description below that talks exhaustingly about par sheets and probabilities. It's very scientific. It's very nerdy. You know, if you want to just upload it to ChatGPT or something and say, summarize it for me, you can do that. But I encourage you guys, especially you guys out there that are just going to destroy me in the comments saying I'm just making all this shit up. I get it. I understand. I know. I've seen the comments. All I really want from people is just to have an open mind and consider that there may be another explanation as to what they are seeing and witnessing. Okay, and that is going to require some research on your part. So if you really are inquisitive and you really want to know the answer and you really want to see if what all this stuff I said is true, do a little research. You will find a lot of information out there, but you got to put some effort in, guys. Okay, well, gamble smart, gamble safe. Hope you guys enjoyed it today. Best of luck out there. Stay safe, be responsible, and we'll talk to you later. Bye bye.